So, we didn't talk about services in here last week, did we? Now, our weekly fourth break, I'm sorry, the weekly fourth break. So we need to talk about services and pricing today. So, services are intangible activities or benefits that organizations provide to satisfy customers' needs in exchange for money or something else of value. Services scholars like Mary Jo Bittner argue that all products are really services. So for the individual critical thinking challenge, for 5 bonus points, who can think of something that you might value in and of itself and not for the service it provides you? So what Bittner argues is that, for example, you go to the McDonald's to get a hamburger because you're hungry and you like the Big Mac and special sauce, 2 all beef patty, special sauce, those cheese pickles, onions on sesame seed bun. And that combination of food makes your little brain happy, right? We know that when you eat things that you like a cookie or a brownie or the Big Mac or the French fries at McDonald's that are the bomb, that little dopamine reactions happen in the brain that make you happy. And so you really don't value that hamburger for its own sake. You don't sit there and look at the Big Mac like my precious, right? Like Gollum and Lord of the Rings. What you want it for is the sustenance that it provides you, or lack of sustenance that it provides you, but the taste, the fact that it fills you up when you're hungry, things like that. So you really want, what's the service that it's providing? It's providing those happy feelings in the brain, it's providing the feeling of being full, and it provides some amount, I suppose, of nutritional value. So that's the service that you want. Is there something that you can think of that you do value for the product itself and not for the service it provides? Yes?
Could you say, like, from a girl's aspect, like getting your nails done? Because it doesn't provide anything. It's just something to look at.
Does it provide a service? You get your nails done and you look at them and you do it so that it's pretty, so that other people say, oh, what pretty nails. And it provides, I mean, there are studies on attraction and things like that, and so people do it. So would that be a service? I mean, I'll give you 5 points for coming up with that. Somebody else have another, yeah.
Would like a religious sort of thought count, like a cross or something, because like you're not really buying it to look at the pretty cross, you're buying it because of the feeling it brings.
But isn't that a service that it's providing? It's the connection to the other world or to the deity?
One could argue, though, that that's not your connection to the deity. It's just something that reminds you of that, reminds you of your feeling. It's not actually providing you already have that.
Is it providing, I mean, I'll give you the 5 points too, but does it provide a statement to others?
Depends if you wear it or not. I mean, if it was just personally for you, like you kept it in the room, only you and your close family saw it, then not necessarily.
Let's think about this. I was listening to George Will on MTP Daily on Friday. And I don't agree with him politically, but he's funny and I like to listen to him because he's very bright. And George Will said, with regard to the ladies that are making the news these days, and I think I've got this quote almost exactly correct because I listened to it so many times because it made me laugh. With regard to the ladies that are making the news these days, I think that there's a critical mass that's occurring. I don't think the country is mostly mad. I think they're embarrassed and exhausted by this whole ordeal. And I watched the Playboy lady on television in her interview. He's talking about the playmate who allegedly had an affair with Donald Trump. And he said, and I looked at her diamond, with her diamonds glistening off of her crucifix, as she says, after we were intimate, referring to the now president, he offered me money, and I'm just not that kind of girl. Now, and I did go back and I looked at, she actually wasn't wearing the diamond glistening cross in the interview, but there were pictures before the interview where the diamonds were glistening off of her cross. And don't you think that that's a statement that she wore that as a sort of, I'm a nice girl too kind of statement?
I definitely think it can be used as that, but also, again, it's what you want to use it for. You said it was like bedazzled, basically, with diamonds. She wanted people to look at it like a piece of jewelry. She wasn't looking at it for the effect it was going to bring her.
Okay, so you're thinking of not like the jewelry type of cross, you're thinking
Just
of,
in general, it could be 2 pieces of wood, it doesn't matter, it's just,
okay,
it doesn't hold any value itself, it holds value to you.
okay. And you cherish it for that thing, although I think maybe you could tease out a service in that it's reminding you of your connection to the deity or the spiritual.
Yeah.
Anything else? Anybody?
I think like the new iPhone, I feel like whatever iPhone it is, you can use the call, you can use the text, you can take pictures, but I feel like people get newer versions of iPhones to say, hey, like I'm up to date with technology.
Okay, but that's a service that it's providing, isn't it?
The service of calling and texting.
Well, yeah, okay, that's one service, but I mean, lots of items have more than one service that they provide. For example, I really do like McDonald's French fries. I don't like a lot of McDonald's food, but I do think that they have, if you want French fries, which have absolutely no nutritional value whatsoever, by the way, right? No nutritional value whatsoever. They do, they're like, if they're fresh. Now, if they're not fresh, they're not so great. They're just kind of, greasy and old. But that French fry has more than one service that's providing. It's making, I like the taste, I like the ketchup, I like the salt, and it satisfies a hunger need. With the iPhone, it has multiple services, so you can use that. So I'm using mine to control the camera right now. It's providing a service in terms of being able to remote control that device over there, which then allows me to provide a service to you, which is uploading this to the World Wide Web and YouTube so that you can watch it later. And isn't another service that maybe it provides the service of saying, hey, I have the latest and greatest thing? I mean, isn't that a service? Isn't it a status symbol, and isn't that a service? That it's providing a status? I mean, I'll give you the 5 points as well. Be sure, by the way, and come up and get your 5 points. I don't want to forget, I won't remember after class, so be sure to come up and tell me after if you answer the question. Yes, what do you think?
How about a memento or something from your past? It's just an object, or even if you go to another state and just like collect a rock and bring it back, there's nothing that it's going to actually do. It's just kind of a memory, so the item moves. It's what you hold close, but there's no good purpose.
Okay, all right, maybe. Anything else?
I feel like it's impossible, because even like the simplest thing, like you use it for something, and even if you don't use it, it makes you happy, or like, like, so what would you possibly have no waste at all,
That you value in and of the thing for itself.
The only thing I can think of is like souvenirs for the file, and it kind of reminds you where you've been, but you don't really use it.
Okay, so it has no real useful purpose. Of course, services don't necessarily have to have a useful purpose. I mean, there are lots of services that we have that are completely superfluous, that we don't really need. But maybe a souvenir or something like that. Anybody else?
What about like a classic car that's in a famous movie, like the original James Bond Aston Martin that was used in the movie? Obviously not going to drive on the road. It looks like you have guns in front of your car. That'd be considered.
Maybe, but you value the thing in and of itself and not for any useful purpose that it has. Although you could argue that perhaps that is a service that's providing you with the ability to say, I possess something that no one else does. How about art? Art may be the one thing that you were going to say, art.
I was about to say music.
Okay, well music, yeah, I think that would be as well. Something that you value for its own sake. That for the expression in and of itself. Art maybe is one, although art could also be seen as providing a service in that it provides covering for your walls or your table or whatever else you use it for, right? But a lot of people do value art in and of itself. There's a very famous movie about an art heist, and a very wealthy individual steals, for no purpose other than to just have, we can't obviously show these famous works of art off because they would be instantly readily known and he would be caught as an art theft. But he values them for the thing in and of itself, and only he's able to appreciate that. But maybe that's a service as well, in that he gets some feeling or emotion out of it. All right, so if you answered my question, if you came up with something, you provided a good argument, come and see me after class, be sure to do that. 46% of US GDP is services, and that is increasing. We are moving beyond being a production industrial society into a post-industrial society. And the value of services have increased 100% since 1990, and that will only continue to get exponentially larger as what we are really producing in this world today as a post-industrial economy is knowledge. It's legal services, financial services, and that's the real value in our economy. So we export $722 billion in 2014, the latest figures for which I have data, and that amounts to a trade surplus in this sector for the United States. So we really have a surplus. So services are enormously important. There are all kinds of services. Which are the ones that are going to be the most profitable? Obviously, hotels and things like that are a service, lodging services. And lots of people are employed in those that don't make a lot of money. For example, housekeeping staff, people who work on the mechanics of the property, things like that. Those are all services. But the real impact, and what most of you will be going into in this class, are those knowledge-intensive services, and those are the ones that really have the ability to really make a lot of money and to expand over the next decade or more. So services are unique. We talk about the 4 P's of marketing: product, price, place, promotion. And obviously when we talk about those are applicable to services as well. But services also have what we call the 4 I's. So when we talk about products, we think broadly. In marketing, it's not just a tangible product. It can be services. But it's also unique in that a product for a service is not something that you can touch. And so we talk about it as a product. We talk about, for example, insurance products. So you have insurance products that you buy. Everyone in here probably has at least one insurance product that they purchased, and what is that? Car insurance. Almost everybody has to drive. We don't have great public transportation in the United States, and so almost everybody has to drive, and you all have, and we call that a product, even though it's really not. You do get some tangible things that you can touch with that product. What are those tangibles that you can touch with the product? You get that piece of paper that you get to keep in your car, which is completely superfluous. I don't know why the police ask you for it now, because they what? They know. The big insurance companies all submit to a database, and the police know whether or not you have proof of insurance or not. They still ask you for it if you get pulled over. So there are tangibles, but that's not really what you value that for. You don't value it for that little card that you get to put in your car or your wallet or whatever you do with it or print it off. You value it for the ability to, when the police officer pulls you over, say, yes, I have insurance, because that's required by law to have in order to drive on the streets in Oklahoma. And you also value it for the peace of mind that it gives you should you be in an accident that, if it's your fault, they're going to cover you. And you're not going to be personally liable or out the money for somebody else's injuries or the damage to their car, things like that. So the 4 I's of services are intangibility, inconsistency, inseparability, and then inventory. And they're all interrelated to each other. So intangibility. Services generally can't be held, touched, or seen before you make the purchase decision. And I've put up here an example of massage therapy. Now, you can feel this, and there is a tangible thing, but you can't experience it before you actually make the decision to buy the massage. How many of you have gone and had a really god-awful massage? Only one? My brother and I were carrying my mother's packages through the mall one Christmas, and there were these people out there that do the massages in the mall, you know, and I thought, God, well, we're tired. They were still shopping, still buying more stuff, we'll put the packages down, and we'll get a massage. It was the most god-awful thing I'd ever, I couldn't wait to get out. It was horrible. I felt like I had been absolutely beaten to death by the time I got out. And I didn't know that it would be that bad until I'd already committed to making the purchase decision. So services tend to be performance-based in many regards. And this leads to credence properties. It's difficult to evaluate them prior to the purchase, and the examples I give here are legal and medical. How do you evaluate? So I'm a lawyer as well as a PhD in marketing. How would you evaluate the quality of legal services? How many cases have been won? Okay. You think that's a good metric? Win-loss ratio? You're shaking your heads yes. Some of the dumbest people in my law school class had great win-loss ratios. Now, when I went to law school, I went to Oklahoma City University. My parents were very upset with both my brother and I. My brother went to law school as well. We were both accepted into OU, and neither of us went to OU because my brother went to OSU for undergraduate and he hated OU. And I went to OU for undergraduate and hated OU as a result of having gone there because it was a horrible school. It's a fourth-rate school, by the way. And I absolutely hated it, so I was not going to go. And I had a job. I was teaching full-time here, and I was the equity officer at the university. So I went to the night programs. They had a night program at Oklahoma City University School of Law. A lot of my colleagues, at the time that I graduated from Oklahoma City University, I think you all think that you pay a lot of tuition. The cost of an hour credit, a credit hour for law school was $950 a credited hour. So basically $3,000 plus fees. It came out to right around $3,000 per class for law school. Now, some of my colleagues that went into law school with me decided that they wanted to be prosecutors. They were true believers. Now, if you are so criminally stupid that you cannot figure out that you cannot come out of law school with $100,000 in debt, which most of them were going to come out, and service that debt by making $28,000 a year, which is what they were paying new ADAs in Oklahoma County at the time, or in Logan County. If you are so criminally stupid that you can't figure out that you can't pay your debt service on that investment by going in, you are a candidate for natural deselection. Right? And they had great win-loss ratios. Why is that? Because the criminals are dumber than them. They're stupid. That's why they're criminals. They have great win-loss ratios. Some of the best lawyers I know have horrible win-loss ratios. They represent corporations in products liability cases. And in strict products liability, you're going to lose a lot. Strict products liability is predicated on the idea that the company is in a better position to pay than you are should you be injured by that product. And these are bright lawyers, and they lose all the time. What they do is they manage to mitigate the damages, but they lose. Take, for example, the case of Searcy versus Ford in Texas. William Searcy was riding in the front of his stepfather's F-150 pickup truck when he dropped something on the floor and his stepdad told him to pick it up, a piece of paper, a wrapper. And William Searcy bent over while he was wearing his seatbelt, which had a shoulder harness, a shoulder restraint, bent over to pick up, and at that exact moment, his father slammed into the back, or his stepfather slammed into the back of another car. Because he was applying a steady pressure as the accident happened, the tension regulator on the seatbelt didn't engage, and he hit the front windshield, breaking his neck in several places. He was paralyzed from the neck down. And of course, who did they sue? They sued Ford because the tension regulator didn't engage, and he was hurt. Ford lost that lawsuit, but their attorneys managed to get the initial judgment against Ford was $75 million. And his lawyers managed to get that down considerably on appeal. They still lost, but they were pretty good lawyers. So it's difficult to evaluate these things. How do you evaluate, for example, CTCA has this ad where we've all seen this ad with Peggy, right? And I got news for Peggy. Peggy's going to, of course, that could be said of all of us. We're all going to die at some point, right? But there is no cure for pancreatic cancer. You're going to die. There are two types. There's one that is sort of slower, and then there's a more aggressive type. But you're going to die. We've all seen the CTCA ads with Peggy. I just water my horse, and it's just the best feeling in the world. If you have pancreatic cancer, I would suggest you don't go to CTCA, by the way. I would go to the Mayo Clinic. But how do you evaluate medical, how can the average person evaluate? Well, Peggy's surviving for now, but does that mean, that could be luck. Could have nothing to do with the medical treatment that she got at CTCA. Maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't. How do you evaluate that? I have a cousin who is a pancreatic cancer specialist at the University of Texas. He's a full professor in oncology. And he has a horrible success rate because people who contract pancreatic cancer just die. So is he a bad doctor? It's hard to evaluate these things, right? It's really difficult to evaluate. One of the things that Amy Cuddy talks about is whether or not a doctor is likely to be sued has more to do with the fact that the patient either likes the doctor or they don't like the doctor. And they've shown that. The studies show that the more likely you are to like the doctor, the less likely you are to sue them if something goes wrong in a medical malpractice. So these credence properties make it very difficult to evaluate services in many respects. As a result, there also, and this relates to the intangibility, there's a lot of inconsistency. Tangible products can be good or bad. McDonald's, by and large, is what makes McDonald's successful. We've talked about this a lot in this class. 3 things, right? It's fast, it's consistent, and it's cheap. Cheap, fast, and consistent. That's what made McDonald's a success. How many of you have seen a movie called The Founder about Ray Kroc, who took over McDonald's, right? The McDonald's brothers come up with this sort of formula so that they can serve hamburgers really, really quickly and get them out the window so that you're not waiting around. That was McDonald's real secret to success, was this quick, fast, and consistent. It may be consistently bad, and a lot of people say it is, with the exception of the fries. The fries were just, obviously the bomb. But other parts of it, Chicken McNuggets, I don't know. They did this experiment, this British chef, which by the way should be an oxymoron because the British don't know how to cook. But this British chef does this experiment where he asks kids in Great Britain if they like Chicken McNuggets. Oh, I like chicken. They all like. And so he shows them how they're made. He takes a whole chicken and he shows them how they're made. And it's not a pretty process. Like all of the really good parts of the chicken are not in the Chicken McNuggets. Basically, you get down to the carcass and they boil off everything. And then they emulsify it. And then they have to put it back together with a thickener. And by the time he got through making Chicken McNuggets, none of the British kids wanted to try the Chicken McNuggets. He did the same experiment in America. And the American kids were equally as grossed out by the process, but guess what? They all wanted to try the Chicken McNuggets. So, Chicken McNuggets, I can tell you, having had them in Oklahoma and New York, are pretty bad. They're not great, but they're consistent. Services, particularly those that are totally intangible, have a lot of inconsistency. It may be really great one time, you go to your massage therapist, and they're just absolutely fantastic. The next time you go, they're having all kinds of arthritis issues, the Bradford pears are blooming, and they're allergetic, and you have a horrible experience. So there's a lot of inconsistency. The quality will vary with each service provider's capabilities. Again, using lawyers. What kind of training constitutes good training? A doctor's specialization. Pricing and promotion is difficult to develop because of this inconsistency. How do we generally pay for services? Well, with regard to things like insurance products, it's based on an actuarial formula that determines and assesses your risk. And we're getting better at the metrics in being able to determine this. How many of you have tried Progressive Snapshot, which gives you cheaper rates on your auto insurance if you will simply give them all kinds of data about your driving habits by plugging it in, so they can tell whether or not you're speeding, and if you're slamming on the brakes a lot, and things like that. And so pricing can be extremely complex with these types of things, and particularly in data-driven services. Organizations, of course, attempt to reduce this inconsistency through standardization and training. So you go to hotels, how do they try to reduce the inconsistency? Well, they train their housekeeping staff on how you go about cleaning the room in order to get maximum efficiency and get a clean room in the easiest and quickest amount of time. But still, you have this human factor that's difficult to overcome in many instances. Inseparability. This means that you don't distinguish between the service provider and the company itself, and that can be problematic, particularly when we think about things like integrated marketing communication, where you want your business to speak with one voice. And if that voice, if it's a service and you've got this provider and the person doesn't like the provider, they project that onto the company itself, and that can be problematic. They don't distinguish between this person. So if you go to Massage Envy and you get a really bad massage, you're likely to say, don't go to Massage Envy, it's horrible. Well, there's a lot of variance there maybe in going to Massage Envy. One of my colleagues that I went to the PhD program with, she did some stuff on luxury, and she actually started looking at this, and she used Massage Envy as one of her studies, and how it has commoditized the massage industry, and what that has done to it in terms of the image. It used to be that a massage, getting a massage and going to the spa and salon, was sort of a treat. It wasn't something that you had every day. Well, what does Massage Envy do? They're the McDonald's of the massage world, right? And if you happen to have a bad experience, you're not likely to separate that out between the company and the provider itself. Also, in this inseparability, a lot of it is going to, particularly with regard to medical and legal services, it's going to be dependent upon your ability to engage in value co-creation, your ability to express what it is that you need. If you go to the doctor and you don't tell them about all of the symptoms that you have, can they treat you? They can't necessarily. So, if you're not fully honest with them, and lots of people do this with regard, I can tell you, having practiced law for a long time, clients, it's the rule of tall, they all lie. Now, they may not be doing it consciously, but they forget certain things that may be critical to their case and your ability to help them. Inventory cost. Inventory costs are really high. So I'm standing here talking to you today about services and marketing, and what does that mean for me as a lawyer? Well, it means that I can't be billing for this hour of my time. And I will never get this back. Unlike other types of inventory with tangible products, which you may be able to sell tomorrow. If I have a can of green beans on the shelf, because I own a grocery store, for example, and I don't sell those green beans today, how long can a can of green beans last? With modern cans, the shelf life of a can of green beans is years, 10 or 15 years. So if I don't sell those green beans today, what can I do? I can sell them tomorrow. But as a lawyer, if I am not billing for my time right now, can I ever get this time back? No, I can't. I can't ever get this time back. And so the inventory costs can be really, really high. Production capacity, having idle capacity where you have the product or the provider available, but there's a lack of demand, creates slack. And so this is something that law firms, for example, work very hard to avoid. What do they want? If you want to make partner in a law firm, what do they want you to bill for a year? How many hours are there in a work year? Well, if we multiply 52, which is the number of weeks in a year, by what's a work week? 40, you come up with what? What is that figure? If I did my math correctly, it's 2080. Is that correct? Yeah. 2080. If you figure that you have 2 weeks of vacation, so that's 80 hours, you have 2,000 hours for the average worker. Law firms, in order to avoid this problem for their associates, if you want to make partner, they want you to bill in Oklahoma City 1,900 hours. That leaves 100 hours left over. You cannot bill for every hour that you're at your desk as a lawyer. So if you want to bill 1,900 hours, how many hours a week are you going to have to work? Would you guess? 75. That's what most lawyers have to work. And that figure, the 1900 figure, is for firms in Oklahoma City. In New York, they want you to bill over 20. Because it's just the cost is so expensive in terms of the law firm and the rental space on their offices and things like that. And so you try to avoid idle capacity by encouraging your associates to bill, right? Everything. How many of you have seen a movie, rather old movie now, called The Firm with Tom Cruise, where Gene Hackman is his boss, and he says if you go to the bathroom and you think about a client, you bill them for a tenth. That's how most lawyers bill, is in tenths of hours, in 6-minute increments. And so if you even think about them, you bill them for a tenth. The service continuum. So most companies are mixed. Most companies are not clearly product-based or service-based. Most provide a mixture of products and services. So in evaluating this, we have to distinguish between the company's core offerings. Is it a product or is it primarily a service? And of course, this has implications when we think about environmental scanning from the regulatory environment. Products are, and this is an example I'll give you to think about, products are covered under Article 2 of the UCC and Article 2A. Article 2 deals with the sale of goods, and Article 2A deals with the lease of goods. Lots of companies now lease. So for example, the company I worked for when I was in the private sector, we leased almost everything. We leased our computers, we leased our furniture, we leased the building that we were in. About the only thing that we actually owned was the intellectual property that we developed, which were our learning management systems and our content that we put into those learning management systems. Now, the reason I tell you this is, why is this important? Why do companies choose to lease almost everything? Like our desks, why do we do that? And our computers and the building. Who are my accounting majors in here? No one wants to admit to being an accountant?
It would be like more liquid if you went out of business, like you don't have to try to sell everything, you just stop paying for it.
Okay, maybe. What's the tax implication on leases? Nobody knows?
Property tax?
No, that's not it. It's that with regard to taxes, you can deduct the entire amount of a lease, whereas if it's capital expenditure, you have to do what?
Depreciate it.
You have to depreciate that asset out, right? And so it's a 100% deduction on a lease. And so Article 2 and Article 2A deal with the sale of goods. Now, the reason I tell you this is because if it's primarily a service with goods attached, it falls outside of the ambit of the UCC. So for example, under the UCC, there is an implied warranty of merchantability for all products that are sold. What does that mean? That the product should be fit for the ordinary purpose to which it should be, or it's intended to be used. What does that mean? Well, it means with regard to things like an axe, when you go and you start chopping the wood with the axe, it's not going to do what? Is an axe a dangerous weapon? Yeah, it's inherently dangerous, but it shouldn't do what? It shouldn't like break and fly off and hit somebody in the head. If it does, it violates the implied warranty of merchantability for the purpose for which it is designed, right? And so you have a lawsuit under the UCC with regard to this implied. Now you can disclaim all of the warranties, but there's an implied warranty of merchantability. Now let's think about this. If it's primarily a sale of goods, you've got this implied warranty of merchantability. If it's primarily a sale of services, you don't. So what is a restaurant? Is it primarily a sale of goods, which is the food that you buy, or is it primarily a service? Okay, so if I give you ptomaine poisoning, you can't sue me under the implied warranty of merchantability. If I give you trichinosis, right? E. coli. There's no implied warranty of merchantability. Is it really a service? I think you may be right. I think you could make a good argument that what is it that people appreciate about a restaurant, about going to a restaurant? It's not necessarily the food, particularly if you think about fast food. It's not really the food, it's what? Or maybe it's, yeah, if you're going to a really nice restaurant, it's the experience. If it's a really bad restaurant, like a fast food restaurant, it's not the experience so much as it is the what? The convenience and the time saving aspect of it. And so, looking at these things along a continuum, is McDonald's primarily a service provider or are they primarily a product provider? I would argue that maybe they're really a service provider. What are they providing? They're providing a quick, cheap, and fast way to get your food that you don't have to then go and cook and clean and do the dishes. It's all disposable and neat, and it comes in a bag, and you can throw it right away. So what is the company's core offerings? For example, and the one I do here is Dell manufactures computers. But they also have support services. So are they primarily a sale of goods? I think in that case, reports are going to say that's primarily a sale of goods with services attached. So what was happening with Samsung, for example, and this is important because, again, with regard to the implied warranty merchantability, if you say that the phone is primarily a service, what does that mean? It means that it doesn't have the implied warranty merchantability, whereas if it's primarily a product with a service that is ancillary to it, then it does. So what was happening with regard to Samsung's phones about 2 or 3 years ago? They were exploding. And that's not a good thing, particularly if it's close to your head. And so, you know, is that primarily a product or is it primarily a service? I think the courts are probably going to say it's primarily a product with services ancillary too. But it is a continuum. You have things that are purely products and then things that are, you know, obviously an Apple is pretty much purely a product. There isn't a lot of service that goes into, once you purchase the apple from the grocery store, they don't come out and polish the apple for you or, you know, dispose of the apple when you're done. It's primarily a product. But it is a continuum. So how do we classify services? Well, we can classify them in a number of ways. The method of delivery is an important one. Is it a people-based service like lawyers or doctors or accountants that are largely knowledge intensive, or is it equipment-based where you don't have so much contact? Things like utilities, your electricity. You don't actually see what you're paying for. You see the results of it, but it's delivered by an electronic device, you know, over the wires that come into your home or your building, and you don't see it. Online banking. There's almost no people involved. There are banks now that have no physical location. They are completely, for the most part, online. And is that, you know, is that a people-based service? Primarily, it's an equipment-based service. We can also classify them as for-profit or non-for-profit. Lots of non-for-profits provide services. Things like the Red Cross provide disaster relief services to people that are impacted as a result of natural disasters. And then government-sponsored. We have federal, state, and local. An example is the U.S. Postal Service, police protection, fire, roads, and highways are all services that are provided by the government through our taxes, so government-sponsored services. So that's another way of classifying them. Method of delivery, for-profit, non-for-profit, and then governmental. How are consumer purchases made? Because you can't provide or because you can't evaluate them prior to the purchase, what do? How do you evaluate services? When you go to look for example, how many of you have had to use a lawyer? What did you do? You what? Looked at reviews on Angie's List. Okay. They do have reviews of lawyers, accountants, doctors, and plumbers, and electricians, and more. Again, I'm not sure. So with regard to that, one of my friends asked me for advice on a divorce lawyer, and I said the best divorce lawyer, like the best divorce attorney, and he's actually, I think, retired now. In Oklahoma County was a guy named Arnold Fagan. I said you can't afford him. He does only people like, you know, that live in Nichols Hills and stuff like that at the time. But there's the next best one is Anita Sanders. And he got on Angie's List, and he said she has horrible reviews. And I said, of course she does, because everybody hates their divorce lawyer. When half of your stuff walks out the door, you don't like that person. Right? I mean, divorce is a stressful situation. I'm not sure that that's a good way of evaluating a lawyer, but that is one of the things that people do, is they get on things like Angie's List or on Martindale Hubbell and evaluate lawyers. What else do you do to evaluate? So you get on Angie's List, what else do you do to evaluate these kinds of things? Let's suppose you need a tree cut down. What are you going to do to evaluate the service? Who are you going to ask? Your friends. Yeah, people that you know that might have had. How many of you have seen the ads? Do you know a good roofer? Yeah, can you give me a couple quotes and book it, for 2 weeks? So you understand, you ask your friends, you ask family, you go online, you do research, things like that. Successful service companies understand how consumers make these purchasing decisions. And they understand how customers evaluate their services. And so, for example, the Hilton hotels and the Marriott hotels have extraordinarily complex customer relation management software systems that allow them to analyze and be able to provide their service with a high rate of consistency. You have to determine how to present different advantage relative to competing offerings. So there are lots of lawyers out there. What makes you unique or special as a lawyer? How are you going to get that out there? Successful lawyers understand what the value is and how to place themselves in the market, how to position themselves. Hotels, the same thing. We watched the Marriott, Bill Marriott turning 80 and turning the reins of his company over, understanding what it was in the hotel business that people wanted and how to provide that and position themselves in the market. So assessing service quality. Once you've bought the service, you've gotten the massage, you've hired the lawyer, you're going to compare your expectations with your actual experience. And the difference between expectations and the experience can be identified through what we call a gap analysis on factors, things like reliability. With regard to things like legal services, this can be very difficult. How reliable is do they call you back? Do they make their court appearances? Those things are easy to evaluate, but are they reliable in terms of the legal research? That's the real product that you want, right? Intangibility, those things that provide. So, for example, lots of salons and spas prior to Massage Envy entering into the market. And again, I think Massage Envy is sort of the McDonald's of the massage field. What do? What are the tangibles that they have that provide credence of properties that people can evaluate? So, for example, if you went to a day spa to get a massage, what kinds of things do they do at places that are sort of more upscale? They what? They have hot stones. They have a lot of nice arts and soothing music and atmospherics that make it a pleasant surrounding. The responsiveness of the service provider. How responsive are they to the needs of their constituents? One of the things that I think about and that I look at is my student evaluations and what students say about how responsive I am. It's one of the reasons I say I like to text, because I can get back to you more quickly. How responsive are the service providers in terms of getting back to their clients, providing them with reassurance and things like that. Assurance, and then a big factor in whether or not people like their service provider is the service provider's ability to empathize. Again, some of the best doctors I've known out there have horrible bedside manner. My brother's father-in-law is a 3-chair holder in cardiology at OU Medicine. He is perhaps the world's foremost cardiologist in the field of electrophysiology. He invented a technique called electrocardiac catheter ablation. But he doesn't really like people all that much. He's kind of quiet. And so he has other doctors that actually see the patient before, and he just goes in and does the procedure. Because it's the ability to empathize. And again, those things will impact whether or not doctors get sued, whether or not lawyers get repeat customers, or whether or not they're sued, for example, for malpractice themselves. Any questions about services? I really don't have time to start price, so we will stop there. On Thursday, we will work on, we'll do the first presentations. Be sure and have your stuff to the Dropbox by midnight on Thursday night, your PowerPoints and your written project. And then I will cover price after we finish with that. If I have to drop a chapter, I will take now, I will drop the channels chapter as a result of having to preempt class because of the National Council of the Graduates. If you didn't sign the roll sheet, it's up here. Be sure to sign it. I can send